Hello and welcome to this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast, the podcast for curious professionals embracing the future of business events. My name is Miguel Neves and I'm the editor-in-chief of Skift Meetings. And in this episode titled Return on Wellness, I have the pleasure of speaking with David T. Stevens, the Director of Field Marketing and Global Events at data.world. David is a 20-year veteran planner who has planned meetings, events, and incentives in media, live entertainment, agency, association, and corporate organization. He's also the 5 times fittest male event prof and the host of a web series on YouTube called Return on Wellness. In our conversation, we talk about things like the ins and outs of field marketing and how this type of role has evolved. How creative approaches to exhibiting that often cost way less than traditional approaches can be more memorable and very impactful. We talk about sweat working and wellness trends in business events. And we talk about the importance of designing short sessions and serving the right food to keep attendees focused. Lastly, we talk about how the COVID pandemic has made attendees very protective of their time. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and if you like what you hear, make sure you check out the other episodes of the podcast on our website and subscribe through your favorite podcast service.
Now for a word from our sponsors, PHL Life Sciences, a division of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. Host your convention or trade show in Philadelphia, one of America's leading life sciences hubs. PHL Life Sciences, the first and only CVB division of its kind, will connect you to the professionals at the forefront of your industry and to a culture you can only find in Philadelphia. A city known for its rich history that's forging a bright future, Philadelphia challenges the expected and defies convention. A world of discovery is waiting. Visit phlife.com to learn more.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Skift Meetings podcast. I am delighted to have a guest who has been suggested by another guest. So this is one of the guests that sort of comes full circle. It's Anke Trifan that suggested that we speak with David T. Stevens. David, really nice to have you with us today. Welcome to the Skift Meetings podcast.
But thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'll make sure Anke gets her non-sequential bills for referring me.
Love it. I love it. We're trying to connect the dots between lots of different people. So I think it's fun when we get a referral, and we know each other anyway, but it's just good to connect. David T., you said there's a story there. David T. Stevens, that's kind of your name online, your name on LinkedIn, etc. So what does the T stand for, and why is that always there?
Yeah. Well, when I got a Gmail account forever ago, David Stevens was taken. So I went with David T. Stevens. Then when I signed up for LinkedIn, I tried David Stevens, and that was taken as well, the custom domain. So I went with David T. Stevens. And so it's stuck around forever. But the T, I think, is the first time I've ever talked about it publicly. My dad, not my grandfather, but my dad was born in 1922 and fought in World War II.
Oh,
he was 58 when I was born.
Okay.
That being said, when he got home, when he got an honorable discharge early out of the Navy, and he fought in the Pacific. And the first person to help him get on his feet was a Japanese man. And he was so overwhelmed with the kindness and generosity of someone who had been put in the internment camps in California during World War II, that someone could just look past it and help someone and not hang on to that resentment. He named me after him, or he gave me his name as my middle name, and that T stands for Takashi, or Takashi as they pronounce it. It's when I think about the significance of it, I love including it because it really shows a great side of humanity.
Wow, what a story! Thanks for going there right away. This is going deep right away, but I always find it strange, or sometimes find it strange, people have these initials as sort of part of their names, but you've kind of made me feel very embarrassed for having any sort of preconceptions about these names. That's an excellent reason to keep that T in there. I hope it stays there forever.
I think at this point it will.
Excellent. So I forgot to mention your job role, but I wanted to kind of introduce yourself. You're currently Director of Field Marketing and Global Events at data.world. Tell us a little bit about that, but also tell us about your journey into events. Have you always worked in events? Was it something you studied, or was it something that you fell into like so many people in the industry?
Yeah. Well, so I've been here at data.world for the last, I guess, about 9 months. I joined in October of last year. Um, I was very fortunate that I got recruited by a former boss. She was going here and she said, "You're coming with me." And I actually told her I wasn't. And she's convinced me otherwise. She said, "No, no, you're coming with me. And here's why," and gave me compelling, undisputable reasons for joining. And I'm super excited to be here. We have a small but mighty team and we're growing quickly. So it's exciting. Anything that's events within the company, we get to be a part of and help drive that. Currently, I'm actually in at a conference, so I'm excited to do this while and I'm doing that. That
And what
also
kind of events do you guys do? Because field marketing is kind of an area I haven't delved into too much. So could you give us a little bit of an idea of how that works?
sure. So, for example, we are at Snowflake Summit.
Mhm.
We have a 10 by 20 booth. We are exhibiting, but that's not all we're doing here. So, why I have a person on my team who heads up conferences, and anything that has to do with the booth is her. But I'm managing all the ancillary stuff around it. So the meeting room, last night we did a event with a couple partner companies at the Magician's Study. It's a speakeasy magic experience that's invitation only and
Mhm.
super tiny, very intimate. You get to see all the magic up close. It's not the big auditorium thing. You feel like you're in a living room. Left a lot of people's minds blown last night, which was super exciting. So field marketing, I think of traditional event marketing for the most part. I know there's all types of nuances, but you think of a trade show as kind of to go back to my dad's analogy of like air cover, like leaflets out of the back of a plane type of thing.
Yeah.
Field marketing, I think of that more like Navy SEALs and precision work of on the ground execution of operations so that it's targeted and you really kind of in control of your own destiny that way.
Yeah, so exhibiting is sort of the vessel, and then you can use experiential activations within that to really make the brand stand out. So you're not just sort of getting the cheapest booth and putting up a pipe and drape or whatever and doing the minimum, but you're actually kind of investing and going way further.
Yeah, I think it's a differentiation of controlling your own destiny. At the show, you can only do so much, right? You're supposed to stay in your booth. You can't go after people, that kind of thing. You hope the right people see your booth and come by. You can put stuff
Mhm.
on social and you can promote it, but you're still at the mercy of the environment that the show has created. Whereas field marketing, you're really owning that destiny and controlling who you interact with by being a little more proactive.
Yeah. And so in your kind of the role, the field marketing part, would you include also doing your own kind of road shows and things like that in that field marketing, or is that a completely separate thing?
Yeah, I would say, especially if you're deciding what cities to go to based on sales rep pipeline and who needs help with pipeline and that kind of thing. Um, Conferences are great, but you get that mixed result, right? Like you might get a lot of people from the major metros, but your sales rep in, I don't know, Kansas City doesn't get a lot. So you got to figure out how to drive pipeline for that rep in that market who needs it.
Yeah. And you also do conferences and other things within that?
Yeah, that it happens on my team.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily head that up, but
Mhm.
yeah, we have a conference person who does that. And then we also do some customer stuff, customer marketing, digital events, all that.
Okay, cool. Well, let's wind back. Let's wind back to the beginning. I guess, I always like to also ask, what was your first contact with business events and this kind of world? Because I remember mine, and I didn't know this whole world existed before, that moment.
Yeah, guidance counselors are very naive to this industry.
Yeah, they're not the only ones, but yeah.
So this was my first exposure to it was a trade show, and I was a kid. I had gotten a job with a company called Earthlink back in 1997 or 98. I was a senior in high school. It was my work experience class, and I sold internet access inside an electronics store. So we would like hand out CDs and try to sign people up. And they said, "Oh, we're doing a booth at Macworld
All
inside
right.
Moscone, and we need people to come work the booth and try to sign people up for the internet." Okay, cool. Sounds fun. I went, and it just blew my small little mind. I was like, what is this circus? I don't know what this is, but I have to be a part of it. So that was my first event exposure. And then I did not fall into this industry by any means. I went out and chased it like it was a dream, in the sense that I realized I wanted to be a part of it. And I was still in sales, and I was trying to figure out how to get into it. And my first event job was coincidental. I was a enterprise sales rep for Nextel. Remember the walkie-talkie phones?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And one of my customers was soon to be customer, someone I prospected, was the San Francisco team for the XFL in the very first iteration of it, which was Vince McMahon's football league. And they were called the San Francisco Demons. And they said they had a street team, and they were looking for people. And I was still very young. And I said, "So what's the job exactly?" And they're like, "Oh, you go to like bars and nightclubs and games, and you hand out shirts and you tell people about us." And it was experiential marketing. You would create events so that people would turn up, and then you'd hand out lots of swag so that people would start wearing it, driving awareness of the team that they existed, and trying to sell tickets and whatnot, and driving around. I think we had like PT Cruisers that were wrapped.
Nice.
And that was my first events job. And that was it. I was done. I was like, I have to figure out how to make this a full-time job. And so I did a couple part-time jobs. The XFL went out of business. I ended up getting another customer that was a radio station in San Jose that actually doesn't exist anymore. It was a country station. And I got on the street team there. And then fast forward to 2002, when the dot-com imploded, and I left a telecom sales job as a senior AE, making fantastic money, to go work at a radio station making minimum wage. And that was the rest of the story. That's how it all started. And I was the brokest I had ever been, but I was happy every day to go to work.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? The money doesn't necessarily work to make you happy.
Yeah, being like 23 also helps as well.
Yeah,
Like,
not having big commitments. So you must have done hundreds of activations, events, all sorts of things. Are there any that really kind of stand out for you as something that you were kind of really proud of being part of?
there's a few that really stood out to me. I think one that I just got to be a part of that was a really fun and unique and traumatizing but memorable experience was um, I was the event manager for MTV Spring Break and MTVU Spring Break in 2006 in Panama City. It was just such a massive undertaking, and it set the record for both MTV and MTVU because it was an unfortunate year with it being the year of Katrina.
Yeah.
But that meant everyone was coming to one destination. Normally, everything's spread out between Miami and Cancun and all these places, but there was nowhere to go except Panama City. And we had 10,000 people on the beach, and it was a, do you want to keep doing this level of event type of event? The answer for me was no, but I'm glad I did it. That was a big one. I think another one that really stands out was back in 2019. We exhibited at a trade show, and it was one of the most creative things we had ever done. We built our booth completely out of cardboard. And it was the 50th anniversary of the lunar landing. And we built a scale replica of the Apollo 11 moon lander.
Yeah.
And completely constructed out of cardboard.
Wow.
So it was sustainable, recyclable, and cheap. So it flat packed, so it was on a single pallet. And so when it showed up, the I don't know if it was Freeman or GES, but they're like, "Do you have any other pallets coming?" I'm like, "No, that's it." And they're like, "Oh, where's your booth?" And I pointed to the pallet, and they're like, "I don't understand," and walked away. Built this structure, and they're like, "What the hell?" But it was surprisingly cheap because it was so efficient. But that, and the show loved it. They hung truss to put lighting on it for us for free.
Oh wow!
So when you get free lighting, you know you've done something special. Yeah. So that was another one that was substantial. Let alone the things it did for Pipeline. Like it put us on the map.
And who was we at that point? Like who were you exhibiting for?
Company. It was called Elation, but I was working for my previous boss. And the way that interesting thing happened is she was at a makers fair, and I think this is important because inspiration strikes when it strikes. She was at a makers fair, and the company who built it, they had made a giant cardboard T-Rex, and she took a picture of it, and she sent it to me. She texted it to me, and she goes, "Wouldn't it be cool if we could make a booth out of this?" And we were talking about our space theme, but when she happened to text me, I was standing in DC at the Air and Space Museum, and they had a little scale, detailless, flat-edged replica of the Apollo 11 lander. And so it all just happened. And I took pictures of it. I took a video of it on all four sides. And when I reached out to the people that made it, they're like, "You gave us everything we needed. Like now we just have to upsize it." And they put the pictures and video into their CAD program, and they're like, "This is easy. We can do this with whatever." And it just happened to work out. It was one of those dumb coincidences that was perfectly aligned.
It's funny how, they're not obviously regular stand constructors, right? But I think you get so much more creativity and that kind of like, let's make it work approach, right? When you kind of go down that way.
Yeah. And we used the spaces in between the legs for our demo station. So it worked perfectly.
Perfect. Yeah, it's funny. I remember we did a startup competition in Vegas at an IMEX show, I think probably 7 years ago, something like that. And I wanted a pretty original award. And so I thought we should have an award that was a floppy disk because, just sort of like tech startup, right? Why not, right? But what I really wanted was a kind of giant floppy disk. And so I ended up reaching out to 3D printing experts and kind of enthusiasts. And this guy ended up printing. It wasn't as big as I wanted it. It ended up being sort of like double the size of a floppy disk. It was still cool. You could kind of hold it, and like there was a little floppy disk or a large floppy disk. But I think it cost me a total of like $11. And he showed up in the hotel and just sort of dropped it up at the reception. And I was like, awesome, right? Like such a unique kind of award.
Yeah. So we were talking about this last night. We did this magic show, and it wasn't that expensive. Sure, it was only for 60 people, but we just qualified better. Like we made sure that we wanted the right people we wanted to be there were there. But it was memorable. And that's the thing is creativity is free.
Yeah.
And a lot of times something that hasn't been done before will make your money go a lot further.
Are you ready to celebrate your successes in the world of meetings and events? The Skift Meetings Awards are back for 2024, recognizing the most innovative business events companies across 15 categories, and we want you to be a part of it. Winners will feature on Skift Meetings, sending a clear signal to events professionals around the world that these are partners they can rely on. The final deadline for submissions is June 11th. We encourage you to start your submission today to secure the best entry rates. For more information and to start your submission, head to live.skift.com.
So I also wanted to touch a little bit on fitness because you are the fittest man in business events or in the events industry, the 5th time running. How did that come into play? Have you always been into fitness, or is this something that also evolved? And where is this competition where you figure out who is the fittest man in the events industry?
Yeah, I got dumped in I don't actually remember the year. I want to say it was like 2017 or something like that. It was a while ago. And I had not been working out. I had not been taking care of myself. And I decided that I was going to change that. And so I started pursuing fitness quite a few years ago. And 2007, not 17, 2007. It's been a while. I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I started pursuing fitness, and I've just kind of stuck with it for quite a while. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, well, a little before that, I worked for 24 Hour Fitness at their corporate HQ, planning their incentives and all that stuff, and their internal meetings, which really taught me about how to meet healthy and how to meet in a wellness focused way, because that's just part of their DNA. So we had to do certain things that were just mandatory, and to live that brand. And then like 6 or 7 years ago, I got introduced to CrossFit, which I had been reluctant to participate in because when it came out, the barrier to entry to be a coach and to open a gym was pretty low. And there were a lot of injuries that were happening because there were a lot of terrible coaches out there, unfortunately, because it was a new hot fad. And so people were jumping on the bandwagon and not necessarily doing their due diligence of understanding good mechanics and movement, especially with some of the lifts and gymnastics moves are fairly technical. So I got introduced to CrossFit. CrossFit has a thing every year called the Open. It's called the CrossFit Open, and it is a global qualifier to go to the CrossFit Games. The CrossFit Games are the equivalent of their Olympics. So 5 years ago, they introduced occupational hashtags. So when you sign up for the Open, it costs $20 to do the Open. And there's a series of workouts, somewhere between 3 and 5, that happen and there's one workout per week. And when you sign up, you get to put an occupational hashtag. So someone could say, oh, I'm the fittest firefighter, or I'm the fittest doctor, or I'm the fittest whatever, based on the leaderboard from that hashtag. So when I heard about it, I had gotten this bug about event professionals not prioritizing themselves. I'll put it that way, because there's lots of things when it comes to wellness. And I was like, oh, this will be fun. I can find out what other event professionals do CrossFit. So I added event prof to my profile. And so I signed up. I participated in my first year, and my leaderboard was empty. So I was the uncontested fittest event prof, period. Not the fittest male, just fittest, because there was nobody else. So, but then I started flapping my gums about it and talking some trash to try to help draw some people in to see if there was just other people who were out there doing it, but didn't necessarily think to include the hashtag. Year 2 was unfortunately the same thing. There wasn't anybody else on the leaderboard. And then year 3, everything seemed to change. And I think year 3 was 2020. And it was a at-home qualification because of the obvious reasons. The male leaderboard only had 2 or 3 people in it, but the women's was very full and very crowded, and which makes perfect sense in our industry. And I was no longer the fittest flat out because the women outscored me by leaps and bounds. And then that happened again in 21. Maybe it was 21. I don't know. I kind of lost track. But either way, that was that's kind of where it all came from. And unfortunately, last year I was the only guy on the only male on my leaderboard again. I don't know what happened to the others, but yeah, that's where it came from. And it's really just, it is my way of, the proving ground is there, and I welcome anyone, and I basically willingly put a target on myself because I want to see more event professionals take care of themselves and prioritize their health and wellness.
I think that's an excellent mission. Let's talk about that a little bit more. We've covered this a little bit on Skift Meetings, and I think anybody listening who wants to challenge David, he's welcomes the challenge. So let's see if we can get some more names up there. But we've covered this a little bit on Skift Meetings in terms of newer generations, and it doesn't have to be an age thing, but newer generations turning away from the alcohol-based networking and the late nights, and kind of saying, "Hey, we want to actually be part of these events, but we don't need to get drunk or stay up really late at night. We actually want to have some more physical activity, and that could be meeting outside. It can be just having a physical activity session at the start of the day. It can take many different shapes. But this idea that meetings don't have to be unhealthy, is that something that you're seeing at your events as well, or do you think it's more of an individual thing?
It's mixed because I'm seeing it at some events and not seeing it at others. I think there's an inherent party-esque atmosphere that happens at conferences and whatnot. And, for some people, it's their first time away in who knows how long, or it's their opportunity to go cut loose. And I think what it really comes down to is that we have an opportunity as planners is to provide agency for our attendees and give them the opportunity to choose what path they want to take, because there is going to be people, there's always going to be people that they have a newborn. They're like, oh my God, I get to get away. I get some sleep, whatever. And I do want to go out and have some fun. Okay, cool. But there's other people that have been on the road for, this is their, third conference in a row, and living that lifestyle is unsustainable. It's just not good for your brain. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your heart. It's not good for anything. So you have to start making more sustainable choices for your well-being. And in that scenario, we need to give those people the options so that they come away from the event feeling good about themselves, instead of like, oh my goodness, I'm just exhausted. That event drained me. I mean, we walk so much. There's so much activity. There's no reason that we should be coming back from a conference weighing 5 pounds more when we have the activity levels that actually could help us lose 5 pounds while we're at a conference.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I always find that kind of interesting. But I guess the richness of the food and the kind of the amount that we consume without even thinking about it probably counteracts that in so many ways, right?
And the lack of sleep.
Yeah.
It's just, it is in traditional meeting fashion, it all just builds on itself to not benefit your health.
So, but I guess, are you saying then that, is there a way for people to be inspired by activity and fitness and things like that at events and make positive changes? Or is it more the people that are into fitness should be able to continue and have that lifestyle and make connections at conferences as well?
I think it's both. I think it's just like, you try to have tracks for people on different things, right? Like, you try to have an event tech track, you have an incentive track, you have anything. Like, you need to have that option so that the people who are into fitness enjoy being there. The ones that want to be healthy, the ones who live a healthy lifestyle at home, feel like they can continue to live that healthy lifestyle when they come to your meetings and events. And it gives the people who maybe haven't or have been trying to the opportunity to engage with it, because they might come and do a workout and go, oh my goodness, like, I don't know why I haven't been doing this more often. I need to do this more. Because they come to, and we before you start recording, you brought the term of sweat working. They go to a sweat working event in the morning and they bond with people. That was the thing that I learned at 24 when I was there, is every meeting, every day started with a boot camp style workout where all the GMs and stuff of the gyms were former athletes and stuff like that. So it was like practice, and everyone's ribbing each other and giving each other a hard time, but they're all pushing each other and motivating. I bet you can't do this. I bet you can't do that. And and people were building those relationships and getting to know each other, and they all left happy and smiling afterwards and ready to start their day, and their brains were primed. So the people that want to take advantage of that, you got to empower them, and let alone the people who want to try it get to experience this incredibly positive environment. So I really think it's both. The other thing I learned there was, when it comes to meals, you might have somebody who's on the straight and narrow, but you might have somebody who's on the straight and narrow but has their they call them cheat days. And if anybody who follows The Rock knows, his cheat epic, but that cheat day is huge for mindset, because it is your one day to stray from the path and do whatever you want. And I would ask people on the surveys, because it was super relevant to them, do you have a cheat day coming up while you're at the meeting? And if I got a yes, I knew that I had to provide absolute almost garbage on the line, because that's what keeps them sane. And otherwise they're going to lose it. If we fed them egg whites and grilled chicken and broccoli, but I don't know, like I could be responsible for, taking that person off their path, because they're like, I need carbs. I need my junk food day. So it really is about letting people make those choices on the line that says, okay, I'm going to have a salad and I'm going to skip the pasta, but then I'm going to have the brownie because I had the salad.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, the opposite way. I'm going to have the pasta because I'm craving that, and I'm going to have a piece of whole fruit for dessert, or something of that nature.
Yeah. And this was, just to keep everybody in context, this was when you were working for 24-hour fitness, right? That was that period.
Yeah, but I do that now at my meetings.
Okay. Interesting.
When I'm in charge of the line and whatnot, like last night, we had that magic event and we had 2 cocktails and a mocktail.
Yeah. Another trend that we're seeing. Interesting. And just to kind of wrap this up, in terms of the networking, I'm not a gym rat. I find gyms a little bit intimidating. So I could see something that's a little bit more light, a little bit more for people that might not be into fitness to kind of feel more welcome. I could see that being quite a positive step, provided, I've got some workout gear or whatever, something like that. But in terms of the sweat working, if you will, is it like, it sounds like it can actually be quite a high quality networking, right? Because you're sort of edging each other on, you're helping each other kind of understand how the fitness thing works for you. It may not be as easy to sort of, look at someone and invite them in, like when you're at a cocktail reception or something like that, and just have that sort of like haphazard networking. But it sounds like once you're actually in a space sort of having some sort of physical activity, the amount of sort of really getting to know each other can actually be quite powerful, right? Like you can actually make pretty good friends within those kind of spaces.
Yeah, it's trauma bonding at its finest. You're doing things that you're literally putting yourself in a intentionally stressful situation, in the sense that it is putting stress on your body. And when you put stress on your body, the physiological reactions that happen are profound, especially when it comes to the brain and what you were then prepared for. But what it does is it heightens your alertness. You go into a mild fight or flight mode. You know what's going on. If there's some people that are, giving each other a hard time, people are laughing about it. People are hearing it. We did one at IRF just maybe it was this month. I don't know. It's a blur. I've been on the road for a little bit, but we did one and it was outdoors. And everyone who showed up, I was fortunate to lead it. I told everyone, I said, look, you've all made an intentional choice to be here this morning. You're all here to do something good for yourself. It doesn't matter what level the person next to you is doing, whatever the movement is, do it at your level, do it at what you're comfortable with, because we're all here to do something good for ourselves. And by the end of it, everyone was laughing and smiling and chatting with each other. And we're like, oh my God, I thought I was going to die during this. And those kind of conversations are they lend themselves to each other, and they all leave with a shared experience because they went through something. And then we also had a coach there. and the coach was putting me through all kinds of nonsense, and people were laughing at it, so it worked out. But it really creates that what we're all shooting for, right? That shared experience. And we didn't have a single wait. All we had was an empty space. We had some towels, and everybody brought water, and that was it. And some music, of course. But yeah, people had a great time, and we all got a group picture after. It was great.
So it does sound like there's a lot of fitness kind of knowledge, but also event design knowledge that goes into something like this almost, or at least group dynamic knowledge to make sure you kind of connect.
It's the perfect intersection of both of those things, because you're creating an experience that is adventurous to people. It's inclusionary, it's active. And when you're in that heightened heart rate mode, you're experiencing positive feelings, you leave happy. And let alone the chemicals that are produced in your brain, specifically BDNF, which is a brain-derived neurotropic factor. When you go to your sessions, you will learn more. You will retain more information, which then usually drives great survey scores, because if someone's like, oh, I went to this session, it was amazing. Well, why was it amazing? Because they remembered what they heard. Like that's big. So then you're priming people for the rest of their day to come back with more information than they would have typically shown up with if they were like still hungover and just craving a breakfast burrito in the morning.
Yeah, totally with you. So you mentioned there, some science behind this, and I think that makes a lot of sense. If you've exercised, if you've had the blood rushing through your body, if you've put some effort into it, you're gonna be more awake. You're gonna be more alert. You're gonna learn better, right? Is that it, or is there more to this?
Well, so the where I learned about this stuff was from a book called Spark, and there was this case study of a school where they tested the students based on heart rate range and all this stuff, and so that is, I think of it as the 3 M's. This is usually what I talk about: mindfulness, movement, and meals. And it comes down to the movement is key, because that is what primes your body and your brain to learn and absorb information. Because you are in that heightened state, your body starts producing these chemicals that go to your brain. They break the blood-brain barrier. We say there's more oxygen in your blood because you're breathing more, et cetera, et cetera. That helps you on one level. Your meals is, the other portion, because obviously that's one of the reasons I like to work out in the morning, because when I work out in the morning, I make smarter food choices, because I'm like, well, I just did this thing in the morning, I should eat right. And when you get to the line and there's various things, including a donut wall, you're like, but I don't know. That's your choice, right? You do need carbs and sugar after you work out, so whatever. But you also need protein. I think one of the other things that I learned recently from a coworker at my current company, one of our engineers told me, when I eat protein in the morning, I don't have to take my ADHD medicine. And I said, I'm sorry, what? He goes, yeah, any morning I either have a high protein breakfast or have a protein shake. I don't have to I have so much more focus. And I recently looked into it, and this is a thing. This is a genuine thing, that while it doesn't necessarily, it's not a cure or anything else, it does reduce the symptoms and help drive focus. So when you're looking at a line and you're looking at your BEOs and you're looking at your menu, the continental breakfast, terrible for people that struggle with that, for their ability to learn when they go into your sessions. So by having some quality high protein, or if you do smoothies, have a protein scoop option. Please, for the love of God, have an option to put a scoop of protein in it. I can't count how many times I've seen a smoothie and there's 70 grams of sugar and 2 grams of protein. Give people the option, because there are people that do struggle with that, and you can create that inclusionary aspect to help them learn as well. So food's really important as well. And then mindfulness, of course, when it comes to event design, you have to think about how much information people can take. And we know attention spans have shrunk since the pandemic. So give people the opportunity to process what they learned instead of locking them in a dark room for hours on end and delivering keynote after keynote. And
that never happens.
I told my executive team, and it went over like a bag of rocks at first, and then they gave it some thought. There was an executive who was like, I need 45 minutes. And I said, great. Can you put the parts that you want people to remember in the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes? Because what? And I'm like, they're not going to remember the middle part. So anything you need to tell them that you want them to remember, first 10 minutes, last 10 minutes. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, then you need to cut it back to like 20 minutes, 30 minutes the most. Well, why? Remember when we were on Zoom and we're like, oh, we need to have short, concise sessions? Well, yeah. Their attention spans haven't changed yet. Just because they're in person doesn't mean they're going to retain all that information. So just keep it to that. And he was like, well, should I just do 30 minutes instead? Yes, you should. Okay, well. And then we were able to have a 10-minute break after a session so people could go and debrief with each other and talk about what they just heard, so that they were sharing different perspectives because people learn different parts of what they learned.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's funny. It sounds very obvious. And I think most people, when they read the research and when they think about their own experience, they'll say, yeah, shorter is better. And, we understand. But then when it's their turn, there seems to be this switch where you sort of forget what you've learned. It's like, but I'm really, I'm just going to talk about this and this is very important. So I'm just going to need all this time. And it's funny how people just instantly forget when it's their turn.
I totally agree. And I also find the irony isn't lost on me on, I have a web series that is a long form web series where we sit down and we talk for like an hour to 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. And it's just two people talking. So that irony isn't lost on me either. But I think, with online content, you can consume it in pieces and it's a whole different thing. So,
yeah. And it's the same thing with this podcast. We have our episodes tend to be sort of 45 minutes ish. That's sort of where we're at. But I do find audio is a little bit different because you don't tend to be only listening, right? You tend to be doing other stuff. So it's more of a passive consumption. And in that sense, I listen to podcasts that are sometimes 3 hours long. I rarely listen to 3 hours in a row. So I'll, stop and start, but I'll listen to whole episodes, very frequently.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting dynamic. It takes some time to kind of get the conversation rolling.
Yeah. And you want to go deep, right? Because I think that's one of the challenges I have with social media and snackable content is that you want that high impact headline. You want that thing that in 10 seconds can change your mind about something. But if you really want to give people a context and really go deep into a topic, you need a little bit longer. You need to kind of drill in, right? And then you need to find the right way to do that.
I jokingly say you have to record 90 minutes to get 90 seconds.
Yep. I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah, absolutely.
I will say that I did learn something else that was really interesting. I got to interview a human performance psychologist. And so she works with Olympians. She's worked with U.S. Special Forces. She's worked with professional athletes, you name it, these high performance people. Mm-hmm. And we had a very interesting conversation about circadian rhythms and how circadian rhythms can play into event design, because your body and your mind are primed for different things at different points in the day. And it was really fascinating to me that there's a reason that we all know, like the post-lunch keynote is like nap time. But that's not just because of lunch. It's also where our circadian rhythm is. There's I will mess it up. There's a dip in brain activity at that time of day, regardless of if you eat lunch at 11 or noon. You have a brain dip in activity after lunch, which I found fascinating. And then about 3 o'clock, it picks back up.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that before also with Daniel Pink. I don't know if you've read some of his books, but he wrote a book about motivation, and then he wrote another book about time and kind of rhythms as well. And that's one of the things he says. He kind of breaks the day into three. And he says that, yeah, that kind of after lunch period it's great if you can adapt to the kind of work that works during that period. That's not a time to have like creative work or to do sort of the kind of top priority tasks. It's more of a time to do admin or something like that, because you can sort of like power through it and not require your top performance.
She said the exact same thing. She actually convinced members at the Pentagon to shift their wartime decision meetings from 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock.
That is, those are important meetings. So I'm glad we're looking at the latest science to figure out when to have those meetings. In terms of your work, and we've covered the kind of the fitness and the well-being and that. I just wonder, because you're covering all these sorts of events and you're designing for attendees of today, right? Are you seeing any significant shifts there in terms of how people are interacting or the things that they're looking for? You talked about short attention spans, but I just wonder if there's any other changes that you're seeing, whether it's kind of post-pandemic impacts of that, hybrid working or anything like that. Are people consuming or attending different events differently today than they were in the past?
I think that what it really all boils down to is people are being more selective. They are more protective of their time. They want to know that what they're doing is worth it. And they want to know that they're going to get, that there will be a benefit for them carving out that time. I think last night was a perfect example where we're at a conference with 10,000 people, and there's all kinds of parties and stuff happening. And you have to stand out in a very noisy, crowded market, right? Because there's all kinds of stuff happening. Your value proposition has to be very, very strong, and your messaging has to be stronger than ever as to why their attendance is worthwhile to them. And I think that is one of the big shifts. Is we used to just get people to come to things because they're like, oh, I'll go to that. That sounds fun. And we got away with lackluster descriptions and whatnot. I think people are a lot more protective of their time now because they got to have so much of it to themselves that now they're willing to part with less of it.
I think that's a really interesting point. It does sound like a challenge, right? Because it's more competition, right? Because everybody's fighting for that reduced attention span and that protectiveness of time. So what would you say to people kind of that are just getting into the industry and trying to figure this out? Are there any kind of special pieces of advice that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think really think through your intention. The CMP exam starts with, job one before you even start planning is define your objective and or what success looks like. And that's more important than ever. I prepped for the CMP. I never took the test. So I'm not a CMP. But that's really what it's about. It's ensuring you know where your North Star is, where you are going, where are you trying to get to, so that you can really continually navigate to that in every single level of decision. Because you know what your desired outcome is going to be, it will keep you on track to ensure that you get there.
Love it. Yeah, and I think that's one of those universal truths that has always been truth, but maybe you need to also adapt to how people are behaving and what people are looking for, right? As these things change.
Yeah, and I mean it's the underpinning strategy to everything you do all along the way. Your messaging, your confirmations, your how often do you follow up with people, all of those things. So you got to keep tabs on where you're going so that you can get there.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's very concise. David, want to ask one last question, which is really for your recommendation for somebody else. You're now the sort of second generation, so we're going to go into the third generation of guests recommending guests, and I like that. So if you have somebody in mind, would love to kind of hear who they are.
Yeah. So I was going to recommend Edward Parati. He's very well known in the Bay Area, but I think he hasn't necessarily. I don't know how well known he is outside of there. I'm a Bay Area native, and he was. I met him while I was working at an agency called Streamline Events, and he was a client. He was working at VMware for a while, and he was just always so inventive and creative, and was always thinking about attendee experience and things of that nature before the term attendee experience really existed. But I think one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is he has had a recent um, change in lifestyle with some health things that came up, and it has really inspired and motivated him. And seeing the changes he has made has really been profound to see. And he's a total character, so he'll be fun on the show. He's far from reserved by any means, but yeah, just seeing the fact that he is uncompromising in his event standards while still ensuring he continues to take care of himself and prioritizes his own health and well-being is fantastic to see someone at that level continue to do that.
I think Edward would make an awesome guest, so hopefully we can connect the dots and have him on. David, it's been a pleasure. Tell us where people can find you if you're willing to. You mentioned a YouTube web series. Is that a podcast kind of thing, or how would you define that?
It's we sit down and chat. I started speaking on this concept we call return on wellness, and we did myself and 3 other people did a white paper on the increased ROI by increasing wellness. That's what we started it as. And then I was a guest on someone else's podcast with Liz Lathan and Nicole Asabodu. And we came up with this term called return on wellness because they're great at branding things. So when I went out and I did the speaking circuit on that white paper, I would, come off stage and have this great conversation with someone. And I'm like, man, we talked about such awesome stuff. So we decided to start a little show, and I'm revisiting a lot of those conversations. And the idea is it's a conversation between 2 people who understand events, sometimes 3 people, and why wellness matters. And it's only on YouTube. It's if you search return on wellness, you'll find it. But there's not a lot of production. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. The idea is you're kind of just listening in on people having a conversation. But I think the big thing to me is wellness is a lot of times seen from some people as this ethereal, hippy dippy kind of thing. And some people want the science behind it. So each conversation, and this episode that's coming out next month, we talk about the term woo woo and the fact that people who are really into wellness from a spiritual and mental state, like, that's not a great term. They kind of hate it. But it was great because the guests I had was Janine Cliff from 4 Seasons, who is a global sales rep and runs wellness retreats, and Lori Sharp, who has been an event marketer for a number of years and has sat on boards and everything else. And the banter between the 2 of them about the justification of wellness and the scientific approach versus the holistic approach, and that balance, it was one of my favorite conversations so far, because wellness isn't this one thing that we can just define. It means different things to different people. So everywhere on social is David T. Stevens. The YouTube series is called Return on Wellness.
Perfect. What a great segue. And you have a white paper as well. Can we find that somewhere?
Yeah, if you
or can we put it in the show notes?
Linked on my LinkedIn, but yeah, we can also include it in the show notes. It's called Increasing ROI by Increasing Wellness.
Love it. What a great way to end. So David, thank you again for being with us today. Appreciate your time, and thank you for the great conversation. Hope everybody else also enjoyed that as much as I did. And see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.